Ora do la parola a un amico che viene dalla Germania, da Mannheim. Uno dei nostri speaker di qualche giorno fa veniva da Mannheim, ma è una ragazza di Palermo, ed è una bella storia averla riportata a Palermo, seppure con qualche difficoltà. Esatto, si sono riconosciuti benissimo. Rainer, nome da viaggiatore ovviamente, Rainer, viene da un'esperienza molto bella e lunga nel mondo del jazz. È diventato un consulente del comune di Mannheim per quanto riguarda l'innovazione.
Il jazz è musica migrante,
E certo, è contaminazione allo stato puro. È uno degli amici che abbiamo fatto a Quito e ci siamo riusciti a trascinare qua a Palermo, e oggi ci parlerà della sua esperienza in un contesto diverso da quello nostro, in Germania, e di come si può implementare la New Urban Agenda lì. Benvenuto, Rainer, it's your turn.
Thank you. Tick, tick.
On the right, and you go.
Okay, back. Okay, thank you. Mayor Orlando, wonderful Push family, thank you for bringing me to Palermo. It's great to be here, and you asked me to bring some stories, nice stories, as we all like nice stories. So I decided to bring two stories, one about Berta and one about Mehmet. And as you can see, they're connected through their curly hairs. So let me start with Mehmet. Mehmet Ungarn is a young man born in Turkey, in the eastern part of Turkey, in Adana, 1957. And he moved with his family to Mannheim when he was very young. Mannheim is a city in the center south of Germany, like 30 minutes drive south of Frankfurt, where the big airport is. You might know, between Frankfurt and Stuttgart. And this, next to Berlin, it's the biggest Turkish community in Germany, is in Mannheim. So Mehmet, with his family, is part of this Turkish community. So he moved to Mannheim and grew up there, and he became a social worker and a musician. And then he started to study sociology. And at that time, he started and was working with socially disadvantaged children. So at that time, he realized that with his cultural background and interested in his cultural background, which was Oriental music, and he's an oud player, he plays the oud and ney, this flute, you know. He realized that a lot of children with his cultural background would like to participate and learn and play this music, but they just cannot learn it in Mannheim, although Mannheim is a UNESCO city of music, as you might know, with a big musical heritage. But there were no teachers for oud. The high school for music, you couldn't study oud and Oriental music, and the municipality music school didn't supply that. So he decided then in 2008, as a private initiative, to start a Oriental Music Academy where you could learn all these things, the different rhythms, different instruments, different cultural background. And his aim always was to have an institute for cultural education and intercultural competence. So as a young man, he became unemployed. Then he found 9 other friends, other musicians, and then they rented this house you can see on your right here, which was in an area called Jungbusch in Mannheim. It's a district with a lot of foreigners living there. A little red light district it was, let's say orange light. So with all the problems, you know better than I do in this area. So that was, and the city itself started with Mayor Kurz, who was the mayor for culture at that time. They did a huge transformation process in this area using music. I will tell you later about that. In this area, he found this apartment with no money in the pocket. These 10 friends just decided, we rent this little house here, 2 floors, and we opened this Oriental Music Academy, which was in 2008. And then, as I am not only a strategic advisor to the mayor of Mannheim, I'm running the biggest German jazz festival, so I'm pretty much connected to the cultural scene. So I got in contact with Mehmet, because you know that someday you will meet. So I met Mehmet, he told me about this project, I learned more. And then, because it was so successful, the Oriental Music Academy, he started to give courses for a lot of children and adults too. He said one day, Rainer, this is too much now. I cannot run this on an amateur base. We have to professionalize it, and I would like that this Oriental Music Academy as a private initiative turns into an official institution. So I advised them, and we started a transformation process. And at that time, as we also had in the city an urban development project which was entitled Culture Space City, the red sign you can see on the left upper, on the right. It's the other way around here. On the right. That says Kulturraumstadt, that means Culture Space City. That was the big urban development project under that headline we did all the urban development things. So at that time he started also working with children in his part of the city, because at that time we had a lot of people from Bulgaria and other parts of the Eastern Europe came to Mannheim, and so it became some problems. We had some problems with children throughout the day on the street, and he, in his neighborhood, saw that and said, I cannot accept that they're unattended the whole day. So he took these children in his Oriental Music Academy and worked with them. And at that time, he said, can we try to get an institution out of my Oriental Music Academy? And you can imagine, it's very difficult to turn something into something private into something very state official because of budget problems. So we started a transformation process, and we did this. We entitled it World Music Institute. That's what we wanted to have, and we did a huge symposium where we invited a lot of keynote speakers from around Europe and Germany. And could you imagine, we had no World Music Institute in Germany. The music country, Germany, had no World Music Institute. And what we heard in the talks before, we should take into account now. You should have in your mind that while the society and the world itself is dramatically changing, some things stay stable, and that's the arts and the culture in Germany. We keep on promoting Western classical music as much as we did before, and that's why Mehmet has to take the private initiative to build up an institution, a private institution in the first place, for the changing society. And my favorite example, and that's quite funny, is that because, we have a lot of opera houses in Germany, per year, approximately, we have 50 premieres of the Magic Flute. Can you imagine? It's a nice opera. No, you would all agree. But 50 premieres of the Magic Flute a year, and none World Music Institute in Germany. So anyway, that was the time. We did this symposium, and I did I was the moderator of these panels, so I was the connection between the field and the municipality. And we involved, you can see here, the culture minister for culture of the county, the municipality, and the Oriental Music Academy, and the Pop Academy. That's a very important institution in Mannheim. 2003, we established the first university for popular music, Pop Academy. So you can study pop music, which sounds quite funny, right? But it is funny, but it's also very successful. Me, myself, I thought it's a very strange idea in the beginning, but now I'm the biggest fan of this Pop Academy because it works out very well. So anyway, all these institutions have been involved, the Ministry for Culture on the state level and the municipality. We did a symposium, and then we worked out a paper to transform this private initiative into an official institution. And it worked out. 2014, we opened the World Music Institute, which is embedded in the Pop Academy. So it's a joint project of the Pop Academy and the Oriental Music Academy, and it's the first BA degree course in world music you can do in Germany. And now remember 2014-15, what happened with all the migration streams in Europe. We had a lot of foreigners coming, like they're named refugees, coming to Germany. And that was very interesting. As Mehmet Ungan is also a musician, he was from the beginning pretty much connected to the Oriental music world around the world. He's playing in major ensembles. He's running one of the major Sufi ensembles of Europe. And he was connected to the music high school in Damascus, in Syria. So he knew all the masters there. And suddenly, we had some of them in the refugee camps in Mannheim. And some of them already were teaching at the Pure World Music Institute. So that was a quite interesting connection then to the university in Damascus and to the refugee camp in the city itself. But it was then quite easy for Mehmet to start working with them to do projects in the refugee camp, not because he was thinking of it in the situation, but it was embedded before in his work. So that was one of the advantages he could take out of that. So since 2014, you can study world music in Mannheim, and that's the only place in Germany where you can study this. It's funny, isn't it? If you think it's funny, you can laugh. But what I like with this project very much is that it came from a very private initiative, because he was in the same situation like a third of the people in Mannheim. That's approximately the number of foreigners in Mannheim. And he just started the initiative without any help, without money, just with friends. And as Mannheim was nearly totally destroyed during the World War II, Mannheim is not known as a beautiful city like Palermo is. So you can imagine it was very fast rebuilt after the war. So it's more or less, the image of Mannheim is more or less that it's not beautiful, it's the opposite. But what I like more, and that comes always into my mind when I think of Mehmet, is another form of beauty, which counts minimum the same amount as the other beauty we know normally, and that's the social beauty. And always when I look at Mehmet and what he's doing, and really very often when I'm telling journalists or when I am with Mehmet and he's telling me his story again, it made me cry very often, not only one time, because it's because of the social beauty of his story. It's so deep that I really would like to enforce us all to look behind the beauty of cities and look at the social beauty that's sometimes very, very high. So I would like to say something you would literally better understand than I do. One asset he brought with him, Mehmet, was he's a very respectful man. And respect comes from the word respectare, which you understand, I don't. But that means looking back and looking behind. And that's what he did. He was looking back where he came from. He was looking behind the surface, what's there, and that's why he could do this project. So I think respect is very much needed when we try to change our cities and when we try to realize what it means that our society is dramatically changing. So, and we're talking a lot about crisis. And when you look, and what I like with this conference is that the connection to the university is so strong, and there's serious research done on crises. And in social sciences, you can find two conditions for crisis. The first is it's unexpected, and the second, there's a need for change. Now you can, if you take these two conditions, you can decide whether we are in a crisis or not. So if you run out of cold beer in the evening, was that really unexpected? Although you think it's a big crisis, it's maybe not with this definition. But when you're in a crisis, you can take it as a danger or as an opportunity. And that's what Mehmet did, and that's why I like this example so much. As there was this need for change, and we all think that's why we're meeting in these conferences, that there's conferences, that there's a huge need for change, and that's why we had all this Habitat 3 thing and the Sustainable Development Goals. it is still very scary for most of the people when they have to change. And we know that on a personal level it's very difficult to change when you reach a special age. So, but on a community level it might be even more difficult. So, and we heard about that, but what is very much needed, and that's deeper than just changing something on the surface, I guess, it's the paradigm shift. And that means that's a huge change that it's needed. And then, I hope one day we can say we've changed. And that's why this quote from Einstein you can read very often, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's more or less what we all do on a personal level, but also on a municipality level or a state level or whatever level. So this quote you can read very often in books, and that reminds me that I brought a book. And you know from whom I brought this book? From Professor Carter, whom I met this week at the UNESCO conference in Paris. And he gave me this book and I started to read it immediately. And I couldn't stop reading it because it describes my thoughts very well, and I didn't write it down, and I do not have to write it down now because he did it already. And I found a sentence I would like to read to you because that summarizes very much the example of the story of Mehmet. And the sentence which I found in Maurizio's book is, in this context, urban areas undergoing transformation, beyond the recovery of physical qualities, aim to become real creative clusters whose economic, social and infrastructural initiatives are able to carry out innovative projects starting from pre-existing activities. And that's exactly the situation. This describes exactly, I don't know how you could know, that this describes exactly the situation we had in Mannheim at the time when Mehmet did his project. So read the book. If we have time, I could tell you, I would please, for a minute, if you have to stop me if we don't have the time, no problem. If we look for a minute on the cycle of culture and creativity, which sounds very obvious now when I'm showing it to you, but I will tell you why I'm showing it to you. It starts with curiosity, of course. We would say we're all curious. And then we need an imagination out of this curiosity. That's what children can do very, very good. And then we become creative. And then an invention has to be done. And then at the end, when innovation turns out of this, then we can close the creative circle. And that's the important step, is the last step from invention to innovation. Because you know, sometimes you hear everyone is creative. That's true, but when we're talking about creativity on that level, we need to have an innovation at the end. That's different to everyone is creative. And of course, everyone is creative. Everyone is beautiful. Everyone is everyone. So, but why I'm showing this circle very often is every red arrow is the crucial point. You can enable or disable every red arrow, and if you disable one of these red arrows, you cannot close this circle of creativity, and then all the talking about creativity for the last decades would be useless. So it's very important. And coming back to Mehmet's example, when he was curious and had this imagination of building up this Oriental Music Academy, he became very creative in doing it, and then he had this invention. But then we met, and then he started this process of the transformation. So if this red arrow would have cut off, then he would still have his private initiative, maybe stopped it because of not earning money with it. So it's very important, and that's why I think it's important that all forces come together in a city. And only then projects like Mehmet's project can become at the end innovation which is stable and stays for a longer time. But Vladimir Nabokov already knew a long time ago that authorities are aware of that creative thinking is the first step toward revolution. That's what he said at times of revolution. And I think still, we should not close our eyes, still you are confronted with this, I guess. So if we, what I think it's very important is holistic thinking. And that I had this talk this morning with Maurizio, and we both agreed it's not about adding things together. It's about doing an amalgamation, so they not can see what is coming from where. So you create something new, a new way of thinking. That means bringing all things together. And again, that's what Mehmet did. He brought a lot of things together in his project of the Oriental Music Academy, and he didn't ask the economic question, he didn't ask one single question, he just put them all together, and that's why his project worked out very well, I guess. And the other story I wanted to tell you is about Bertha. Bertha Benz was the wife of Carl Benz. And you might know or not know that Carl Benz invented the car to the world. And he did that in Mannheim, 1885. He had a garage in the city center of Mannheim. You can still go there. Looks different now, of course, because it was destroyed in the war. And you can see here on the right, that's the first ever article in the newspaper saying that that the car is invented. And on the left you can see his handwriting. Just that was Carl Benz, and that was how the car looked like. Only 3 wheels, but the advantage was you can take curves. And Mr. Maybach at the same time he developed also a car, but with 4 wheels, but without steering. So at the curve, you had to go out and turn the car around. That would be very funny nowadays. So, but Bertha Benz, and that's very interesting. So 86, the car was invented, and 88, Bertha decided one morning she's taking the car now for a ride, because Carl, who invented the car, didn't want to ride it because he thought it's not finished. And she lost her patience, and one morning she took the car and went to Pforzheim, which is some 60 km from Mannheim. That was the first car ride ever done in the world, coming out of Mannheim. So, and why that? Because that happened in Mannheim, we think it's quite important that we're also dealing in Mannheim with all the negative sides that the car brought into the world. Mobility became better, but we know about climate change and all that. And car is one of the biggest providers of CO2, as you know. And this year also is 200 years of the bike, which was also invented in... Thanks. So if you're talking about inventions, you say Mannheim, you're mostly right. So just, it's very easy in a quiz. So, but it's true. Karl Dreis, 1817, invented the car, and that was in Mannheim. So we celebrate 200 years of Mannheim. It's a big party in Mannheim with 1 year ongoing program. And because of that, and that's the next thing, because of our invention from Mannheim, we have this SUV kind of stupid thing, and that goes not with the SDGs. So we thought in Mannheim we have to do something to invent more positive things for the bike. And that's why we started a project with SAP. You know SAP, the big software company. It's closed. It was also established in Mannheim a long time ago, but then moved to a small town just 10 km from Mannheim. And they have 2 interesting projects in their company: the Next Gen and the Young Thinkers, SAP Young Thinkers. And Next Gen, it's a project where SAP is dealing on the New Urban Agenda background and on the SDG background with these SDGs by including the civil society, especially young people. And these 2 projects of SAP with the metropolitan region where Mannheim is based and Mannheim itself worked out a bicycle app, which is different to the apps we're having now. So to improve taking the bicycle instead of using the car in our region. And this is now, and they use very modern methods like design thinking and others, but what is very important, it's very inclusive. They work with universities, with municipalities, with the metropolitan regions, and with very young people, with schools, and older. They use mainly in design thinking as a method, and this month they open. No, it's not here. It's gone. Oh, here. This month they open a next-gen office in New York, and first they tried the bicycle lab in Mannheim and in the region, and now they bring it to New York. Maybe they can bring it to Palermo. Why not? I think it would be interesting to get this connection. So at the end, thanks for your patience. At the end, as I really realized immediately by meeting Mauricio, by talking to the Push people, and we met in Quito, and by being here, you really do not need advice, because I'm really enthusiastic about what's going on in Palermo. But let me close with two things you should take into your mind, and it's from one of my old favorite bands, Chumbawamba from the UK, maybe you know. The first advice is, look both ways when crossing roads, don't wear slippers till you're old, and never do what you are told. Thank you. Thanks.